I teach in these rooms, so hopefully that'll help me not be too nervous, but it's always a little, this is momentous, and who knows, one of you might be a scout for TED Talks, and I'm ready. I just need one of those things, But so Alessandra asked me not only to talk about my work, but also the wonderful group of women I'm currently involved with called Feminist Image Group. And that is just so cool because they make my life so much better in so many ways. And often students will ask me, how can I make it as an artist? I say, form a collective, be of service, okay? And that seemed to work. But, that's hard sometimes when you've been a community artist your whole life to know which pile this work goes in and which pile that work goes in. Is this my work? Is this the community work? Is this the work where it bleeds over? It's kind of hard to keep the categories straight, and that has made me this kind of artist that has to work really hard to stay grounded. And one thing I do, and the kind of work I put in the show, is a self-portrait. And I like to do them quick. I like to do them with my non-dominant hand, and I like to do them like daily. When I'm in my groove, I'm doing them daily. And I don't worry too much about making myself look funny or ugly. It's more about finding something that says, oh yeah, I'm in my body, I'm okay, I'm here on the planet, it's another day on Earth. Because in the era of neurodiversity, I fit right in just fine. But, like a lot of artists that I have run into and students that I've run into, we don't have an easy time just showing up for life in a sort of a straight and narrow kind of way. We're kind of complicated people. And I have to tell you a little bit about how I got that way. So the one with the halo in the back, that's me. And those are my 7 sisters and my mom. And this is like, we were often in these portraits kind of lined up like this on a religious holiday. And there was a process of uniformity that was sort of overlaid on our reality by the religion we were brought up in and the family. And I was always trying to put that through my own filter. And so early on, when I was still a student and I took up black and white photography, I started trying to get my sisters to cooperate in these portraits that weren't so sweet and shiny. And it didn't always work, but they humored me. And we still do these kind of things. These last 2 were both taken in front of our family farm in Oklahoma. So another kind of filter besides photography that I try to put my experience of having all these sisters was painting. And something I'll tell you right away, students, is that most of these paintings are they're appropriated compositions. And this was appropriated from an old woodcut of witches being hung in Salem. And I just felt sorry for those witches, and so I just kind of turned the image sideways and made a portrait of me and my 7 sisters, just telling bedtime stories. Or this one was appropriated from Bruegel, and those 8 girls on the shore, those mermaids, those are me and my sisters, and then these were whichever, latest father figure I might have imposed on my 2 sons when I was a single mother later on, and my son is here. So he can testify, but so it's always back to grounding yourself with the art. I quoted from a poem to kind of just tell you what that really feels like to be part of that kind of hive mind. It's just so much of a hive that you don't really know where you stop and the other person starts, which is probably what led me into being a community artist, and also why it leads me back to the solitude of my studio and those self-portraits. It's like, where do I stop and where do you start? Whose work is it anyway, and who am I and who are all of you, and how can we fit together? But, that experience of crowding and all those women just made me want more, and that's, again, later when we get to Fig, it's like, they're not my sisters, but nonetheless, they are. It's like, it's complicated. this is a work I did even recently. I'm still trying to filter this kind of feeling and information about being part of such a group. This was a piece I did for a wonderful show that happens every year at Casa Familiar in San Isidro, and it was chosen for the poster image. So, you know, things go around and come around, and they kind of they always matter. I'm taking you back again, though, in time to a first time I really got to be a community artist in my school days. Before I even got a bachelor's degree, I worked in a local cafe as a waitress, and I took pictures of my colleagues, and I was able to land a little gig doing advertising, doing commercial work that built us a real solid arts community. And I could see the power of what the image would do to bring people together, and the power of a warm gathering place, kind of like the one Pat Vine has always made at Mesa College. The food, the people, you know, that need we have as humans to get away from that institutional environment. This was right across from Oklahoma University. And Michael, who's sitting right there right now, he was there, and he had to amuse himself because I was slinging hash and schooner, we call them schooners of beer back in the day, while all the music was going on. And you know, I was also out in the world with Michael, and always trying to be in touch with that mystical reality of being somebody's mom. And my girlfriends, we were floozies, you know, we were single mothers. It was a sexual revolution, and we were all trying to support each other as best we could. This is my friend Donna. I'm still in touch. We formed a club, and we gave ourselves scholarships. We had fundraisers. We took the kids on field trips to Tulsa. I mean, it was like, I don't know how we would have got through undergrad if it weren't for each other. And we're still all in touch. Later on, here in California, I was just called and moved to make a piece. I guess I was kind of trying to work on my own sainthood somehow, the kind of medieval sense of being out in a what is it called, an anchorite, where, you know, you set yourself up in the community. This was in the part of San Diego where the first homeless shelters were begun, which is now Petco Park, 12th and Imperial. And Father Joe's first building was just put up. There was a lot of crossroads, and I made a little stand that offered water, bedrolls, and I got all those fruit vendors that used to be there to give flats of strawberries and food I could give away. And I made it into a kind of a place where people could be and talk to each other. Again, trying to make a place, trying to make a community. And also, who am I in this? You know, I had to wear a certain identifiable outfit. And I was working a day job as a secretary at the time, so I just used all my comp time so I could actually be there and be with the people. And, you know, it kind of put me on the map a little bit. And that got me a little gig. See, this is what happens if you take yourself out of your comfort zone, put yourself out on the street corner. You know, pretty soon things happen. I got this gig at San Diego City Schools. A millionaire dumped a couple mil on the city schools, and all of a sudden, all the artists had a job, and I got out of my UCSD crowd into knowing the whole city of artists and all the ethnicities of artists and all the artists from all the different classes because of this one little gig. Suddenly we all could get our glasses and get our teeth fixed. Some people even had babies. And I started figuring out, well, I'd really done parades before, but this was the first big parade. It was for Art Walk, and we got every elementary school with all the artists at the schools to organize parades. That was my contingent from Emerson. And my friend Anna O'Kane, who some of you still know, we made a kind of a place where the parade ended up. We called it the Speaker's Corner, thinking about free speech in the public places. That kind of got me on the radar of some women who were forming a collective called Las Comadres. And we had a show at Centro Cultural de la Raza that was focused mostly on issues of the border back in the day. And some of us were from Mexico, and some of us were from here, and some of us were other places around the world. But we collaborated and we worked together. And so, like, my part of this installation was just this part. But I helped everybody else get all these other parts together. We created these environments in Centro Cultural de la Raza. We were trying to counter the idea of the border as a military zone and think of it more as a neighborhood. And our show was called La Vecindad, because we were thinking of it as a neighborhood and a house with kitchen and a reading room. In this case, my part of it was like recognizing the real evil and ill of what was happening behind that freeway sign that we all used to see everywhere, is that all the people that were dying back in the day. And the rug that others made, that was like a hate letter sent to the Quaker group that was trying to help the migrant workers. We all made artist books. Well, that was coinciding with another thing that started happening in my life, which I met John Hyken, who's also here, and together we formed Fern Street Circus. Because, of course, I had a day job, and then I was working in arts administration at City of San Diego, trying to help other artists make a place for themselves. And this looked like the coolest thing. I said, you know, he said, I believe art should be in the neighborhoods where the people are. And I said, oh, we believe that too. And I said, but you need a parade. And he said, oh, I do. And pretty soon we had formed this circus, which is still going on. And this is a preview. Wendell might be talking about this right here, because this is Wendell's set. But I was kind of a marginal character in some ways, because I'm not a performing artist. So I might just have this like a little museum of my paintings. But I also did those logo and poster designs, and I even dressed up, and I had a cart, and I would like be in parades with the kids and organize parades. This was called Grupo de la Calle A in Golden Hill, because, you know, all the people in apartments who were like, right before Prop 87, they were like, should we go out in the streets or will we get deported? So we made contingents, I painted faces. But, you know, there's that push and pull of, do you want to be a circus wife or do you not? And so I was always like, there's always that. And you always like, you know, that goes back into your private work again. But again, which pile does that painting go in? The circus pile or the Cindy pile? You never know. Whose work is it anyway? This is the Golden Hill Rec Center community mural. You can still see it if you go over there to play basketball. I went back recently with an old friend, and there was one of the little kids that made it with me, all grown up. But when I go to that place, this is what I see. You know, I remember when there was barely anything on the wall, and one kid would get one brush full of black and go like run through the whole thing and like wipe out all that day's work, and you just keep going. You know, you just keep going. And this little avatar of me right here, see, there I am again, a teenage kid who had just arrived from Mexico to live with his uncle, Mexico City, and his uncle was a Mormon, and it's like, he's gay. It's like, what am I going to do? He said, can I work for you? And so he did, and without him, I could have never gotten the mural done. And the mural has all these little houses, you know, it's like our neighborhood, and make the house like of your fantasy, like California crazy architecture. And so these were the kind of things they were making. And so recently I had a show at Art Produce with Lynn over here, and I said, well, I'm just going to cut that one out of that mural and redo it, and that's my art. But that's the way it is when you're the kind of artist like I am. Another one was the Great Balboa Park landfill exposition with straw bales and hundreds of people. It was part of Insight, community engagement. I always like to draw these things, sometimes before, sometimes after, to really know what I'm going to be up against. In this case, I really made a fool of myself a lot of the time. But we got those things built, and straw bale and adobe. And I had like truckloads of mud hauled in from a construction site in North Park and truckloads of straw bales from El Centro. You just do what you got to do, and you follow your calling. You follow where it pulls you. Going faster. Sometimes I'm really dealing with my own demons, and I'm really like, how could I make a laugh out of this? But I've got this community gig where I'm helping girls make portraits of themselves and write about their timelines and their issues and their dreams for themselves. So it's like always, I don't know, it pulls it all back together again. Another one, Art Produce, recently, I was just looking at, am I aging out or am I just getting ripe? You know, so I sort of got to thinking about, you know, what will I draw? What will I make? Is my life really just nothing but a story of being at size 10 wide or what? You know, it's like, I try to laugh. I brought in students with me this time. They were my community, and they came and did workshops because that's the kind of place Art Produce is. And we ended up with this, and that drawing of Heartman back in the back, that's Michael's when he was 7. And now our circus has a giant puppet of Heartman, and things like that just keep happening. Okay, here's Fig, my beloved Fig. So the women get together, and there's like an idea or a calling, and they start with maybe something that Gracie Gray Adams had this left over from another installation. And we said, well, we can work with that and make our own art about the fence. And we were able to work with a group of women from Tijuana. What I love about Fig is we don't just meet to talk about art, but we do that. We don't just get gigs for each other, but we do that. But we work together, and that's the part that I really love. And you know, people like Lisa right here, and you're going to see Anna. A lot of our women from Fig are here in this audience tonight. I'm so happy that I got to become part of this group and see how they work together. See how, you know, the visions become real because we help each other. And sometimes my part might be really small and I might not have star billing. It's just something about making a place. Again, it's about making a place and being a community together that makes all the difference. There was Bobna's books on the fence. And the cool thing, I think this was Lynn's, that we would have a table that was on both sides of the fence. And all this kind of cycling, this eternal return of the themes coming back again. And we have gatherings where we actually, you know, have a talk with each other and hash out issues. Even sometimes we don't always agree on things and it's uncomfortable, but, you know, we keep doing it. This is another one, Women at War, that was organized at Grossmont College. That this was my contribution. I mean, I might have made this art anyway, but it's so much more fun to make this art when I think of what the other women in Fig are going to think of it. You know, if I can come up with a good joke, I hope they'll think it's funny too. You know, this was deconstructing, like if Joan of Arc's voices sounded like the voices in my head, and a whole idea about what it means to be a voice-hearing kind of person. You know, this is another one we just got through with not very long ago called Feminism Now, where we both got to stand, like there's Helen, we stand in front of our work and talk to other people about it. That was yours, wasn't it, Stacy, that in the previous picture? Yes, it's so cool because, you know, that was mine right there. That Anna and Lydia had a little panel discussion, and that's my piece sort of in between them. You know, it's little, but it's part of a whole, and there's our audience. And see this girl right here? Suddenly, a girl that just came to be at the show, suddenly she's on stage talking about her experience of feminism. You know, it's like, that's cool to me. My piece was like thinking about reproduction, and back to my sisters again. That poor visible Madonna, my dad gave me a kit like that when I was a girl, and but no adhesive, and I was too embarrassed to ask for any, so I just kept like putting the fetus in and taking it out, I was like, finally I thought, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. I ordered a couple on eBay and put it together without any adhesive, just using sewing techniques. And then thinking, you know, there's the 8 girls again, thinking about what it means to have people tell you you can't decide how you're going to reproduce. We're dealing with some serious issues. And for me, at least, I don't know, not everybody in the group, but for me, I'm always looking at how could we laugh. This is a work in progress for a coloring book we're making now. And another work in progress, I'm now working with Mary Magdalene instead of Joan of Arc and thinking about her hair. And I'm showing you a work in progress. This one isn't even done, but I'm so enthusiastic, and I know so much of it has to do with being in this group. And those are some of my students. You know, we get to pass on what we know. There's a beautiful thing, isn't it? There would be both more and less of me to have to bear. None of us would be forced to be stronger than we could be. Each of us could be all of us, the pretty one, the smart one, the bitter one, the unaccountably happy for no reason one. I could be, for example, the hopeless one, and the next day my sister would take my place and I would hold her up until my arms gave way and another sister would relieve me. And that's Fig. And that's my story. Thank you.
I forgot. Here, I have a prop. Cindy didn't have a prop. I have a prop.
You're so competitive.
No, but so it's okay.
Lindsay's not competitive.
Whimsy? Okay. So it's a joy to speak with Cindy because we have had strangely entwined careers as human beings in this town, and one of the ways we ended up together was we're both in San Diego. We also both went to UCSD at certain points. I'm not sure if we ever overlapped, but could be. And then the other thing, and maybe this is partially because of going to UCSD, that both of us have been drawn to sort of communal exercises or community exercises within our artwork. Frankly, I think she's way more successful at the community, partially because I hate people, but no. So I do think she's better at the community part of things, but there's always been within my work sort of an idea towards creating not only stuff but the world that I live in and the world that I interact in and the people that I interact with. Okay, so this piece is in the show. Just very briefly, I am inspired by various things around me, the stupid things in my life, the things that I find in thrift shops. This used to be a very ubiquitous object. It is a fake fire, and I just love it because it is so stupid. It is this crumbled tin can with a light bulb and a motor, and it's screwed together with, someone dug screws out of a thing, but it was professionally produced. So anyway, I don't know who is screwing these things together, but I love it. And then I thought I should make one. It's so stupid. I could totally do this. So. So I was working on this, and I was like, yeah, but I have to make it big because that's who I am. I like to make big stuff. But there's an art school saying that I always relate to my students, that if you can't make it good, make it big. And if you can't make it big, paint it red. I've added one to that saying, which is, if you can't make it any of those, put a light bulb in it. So this kind of appeals to me. But also, the palette fire is as an image, it's a bonfire, it's a beach fire, it's a place where you go and sit with your friends and drink beer and have a good time. And maybe it's that having a good time that always sort of appealed to me. So I'm going to move to home for a moment. This is my garden, and at a certain point, I was hosting Sunday morning pancake breakfasts, and in order to get my lazy hungover friends over for pancakes on a Sunday, I would have to start calling people at 10 a.m. and go, get over here, the pancakes are on the griddle, we're gonna be doing it, and I'm making the coffee right now. And so sometimes I would get 5 people, and sometimes I would get 35 people, and then they'd all be sitting around eating pancakes on their knees, and I thought, I actually, through a circus connection, which is another of Cindy and my connections, someone called me up and said, I have a pile of, an old lumber pile in my yard. Do you want it? And I said, sure. And I went over and I'm like, that's 20 feet long. I need to borrow a truck. So I borrowed the circus van, carried the whole load of lumber over to my house and was looking at this pile of lumber and went, it's a table. It's a table. So anyway, that's my feast table. But I like the image of the table is as a sculptor, which I call myself for lack of any better term, it's an object that holds a possibility in it of this event around it. So to me, as an object, as an image, it sort of brings together a lot of my interests. I've always been interested in formalized spaces. So part of, the theater and the banquet hall or the museum or what else did I write down here? So formally, I'm attracted to this, and conceptually, I'm attracted to the idea of this kind of a space. Frankly, I think I've only ever done anything with the stage that was completely non-performative and non-theatrical. So I've shown it as an object, but not with the intent of actually performing on it. Someday, maybe. Okay. But since Cindy went back into her high school years, and since some of our students are here, and I'm sort of thinking about, how did I end up being an artist? High school, punk rockers. This is in the smoking section of our high school. We had a smoking section. And part of, I found this scene, and part of it was because I really didn't feel like I fit in with mainstream America and needed to find a place for myself. So I joined a band, of course, and made lots of noise and went to shows and did all kinds of stuff. And then I ended up at UCSD. And in order to work my way through UCSD, I was a movie theater projectionist back when there were projectors. No, there are still projectors, but when there were actual film projectors. But I went to UCSD and worked with some of the professors in the art department there. I had been a painter in high school, so I thought I'll study art. And I started studying painting, and I did quite a bit of painting. And then I was studying with certain people, Alan Capro at UCSD, who were talking about things that went beyond 2 dimensions. And one of the things that impressed me when I was at UCSD was that one of my favorite professors, Jerry Rothenberg, who's an esteemed Beat Generation poet and ethnographer and general good guy. And I went into his class, and it was a performance art class, and I had resisted performance art because I thought, oh no, that means I have to get up on stage and make a ham out of myself. And he was going around the room on the first day of class and said, tell me what your experiences have been with performance. And he got to me and he said, I know you've been in this rock and roll band. And he legitimized this thing that I'd just been doing because I was bored, and I was not a sit at home on the couch kind of kid. I told my students earlier, here's a good story. 1982, this momentous occasion in 1982 was the advent and beginning of MTV. And I didn't have cable at my parents' house, but I went to a friend's house and we were all excited about this new thing, MTV. And I sat there for 2 hours watching music videos and got so bored. And I just wanted to go make stuff. I always wanted to be the one making it. I didn't want to sit on the couch watching it. So that was the extent of my MTV, 2 hours in 1982. So at UCSD, I start hearing about, in high school in the 80s, I knew about the hippies. I was intrigued by, communes and free love, and I thought that was the decade. And then I started hearing about these artists who were doing these crazy things, for decades. And so the Italian Futurists, here we have a drawing by Umberto Boccioni of one of these events that the Futurists would have. So we've got paintings on the walls, a stage, a live orchestra, 5 futurists speaking simultaneously, yelling about the nature of art, and a writhing mass of nude bodies on the stage. And I remember I walked out of a lecture once with a friend and said, why doesn't that kind of stuff happen anymore? And so we something clicked, and we decided that we had to make this shit happen. So, and of course that goes back to Alan Capro and the happenings. Machines that make effects. I heard about the Dadaists and Hugo Ball dressing up in a completely ridiculous paper outfit and declaiming nonsense poetry. And of course the 1950s in New York City were with the happenings, these performances. Where it's these artists and all of their friends coming together in a loft in New York City and doing stuff, and I got further and further away from wanting to make paintings, because paintings were just more stuff. I wanted action, so and you would paint a picture and put it on the wall and go, well, now what? It's there, and but I wanted to shake people's hands, and I wanted to have a much more direct relationship. So anyway, Cindy was saying she was going to do things from all over her life, and I thought, it would be great to show things from early on. This is the earliest photograph I can find. Everything before 1995 was pre-digital, so it's all sitting on 35 millimeter slides in a dusty room somewhere. But this is a cat performance that I did at UCSD while I was still there as an undergrad. That was accompanied by a laughter chorus, which is wonderful. If you get or 8 or 10 people in front of an audience and have them start chuckling, it takes moments before the audience is chuckling and laughing uproariously. So I'm doing these things. Post UCSD, I'm collaborating with artists, which is a very fraught thing, and you have to find the right group of artists to collaborate with, I think, because I've had extremely successful collaborations and not so successful collaborations. And so this is the late 80s, and we moved to a space downtown in San Diego that was in an old church building on 10th and E, and we moved into the basement space, which was a good 8,000 square foot space for 24 cents a square foot or something like that. So we were, the rent for the whole space was $1,200, and there were 5 of us living there, and each of us paid $125 a month or whatever. And that made it really easy to make things happen in San Diego at the time because it was cheap. Now, of course, it's what, $4 a square foot for downtown space. I don't know what, but at those rates, you could pay your rent, live there, and just host these events. So we started having performance evenings in these places downtown. My work was these object-based performances. One of the things I meant to say when I had the picture of the projectors, the projection booth on the wall, these were these machines that made magic. And I was enthralled with this room. I spent 40 hours a week during college in the projection booth, And I couldn't care less about the movies. I really was not a movie person, but these machines made this stuff happen, and I thought it was so great. So, as an artist, I start making objects that allow for things to happen. Graduate school. I think, oh, I should learn how to do something while I'm at graduate school. So I learned how to weld, and I was welding together old bicycle parts into fantastic multiple rider collaborative vehicles. And then I thought, what should I do with them? I'll have a circus. So I sewed some costumes and painted some backdrops, and here's they all did different things. This vehicle drew a line everywhere it went. It was made from one of those football field chalk line drawers, and then I move on from there. My 1971 Volkswagen Bug becomes a party light. And then, of course, once you have a party light, you have to have the party. So I wheeled that one around for a while. Oh, and then at one point I hear that there's this great little circus in town. You should really go check them out. And I needed a job. And I went to John Hyken and said, I make circus-themed art. And he was like, we need a rigger. He said, you ever done any rigging? So I started designing sets for the circus, and under my watch, we had no aerial acts fall to their deaths. So that's a nice but grainy image of the aerial act in front of the set. Okay, so this was fun because I hadn't really painted in years, but sometimes there's this skill I have, and sometimes how do you get an image that is 60 feet wide by 15 feet tall quickly and cheaply? And frankly, rolling out a giant piece of canvas and painting it is faster than having it printed or whatever else you could do nowadays. And it was also just the sheer scale that was loads of fun. More sort of theatrical, performative kinds of things. This was, I was invited to do a show for the Miami Basel, be in a show, Miami Basel Art Fair in 2005, and then there was the same show sort of moved to a gallery in New York. And I needed it to be movable, so I built it into a suitcase so that I think the suitcase still has its airline check sticker on it. And then the city was burned in live performance. Now I'm just sort of doggedly going through sort of through time. This was a collaboration that I did with Brian Dick, who is now out of town, but has taught here in the past. And he and I decided to do this project where we were going to make a film. We were going to make a Super 8 film because he had a Super 8 camera, and when you have the camera, what do you do? And we said, okay, well, we both work with these simple materials. Let's get a pile of cardboard and duct tape and plastic bags in the garden, and we'll host this event where people will come and make monster costumes. So we made a monster movie. If this thing works. Super 8, and we had three cameras, and after an afternoon of people making these monster costumes, we then filmed this monster movie in the vacant lot across the street from my house. And then we showed these three films as a triptych with record players playing records on half speed, and shopped that around for a while, and then we were invited to, that's Jimmy Watts, if any of you guys know Jimmy. We were invited to do a show together at Southwestern Community College Gallery, which is a beautiful space. And we were thinking, what do we do with this space? And well, we should continue our monster movie sort of idea, but let's make the banquet hall of the monsters. So it's a banquet hall. There's the original monster movie showing on the proscenium stage. There's all of it is made out of cardboard and duct tape and plastic tablecloths. And Brian and my collaboration was really fruitful. We bicker constantly, but somehow get this stuff done. Okay. There's the proscenium, these sort of monster-inspired window treatments. More images. I was invited to do a show at up in Oceanside at the Miracosta gallery called the Kruglock Gallery. It's the only Klingon gallery in town. I'm sorry, it always, Kruglock, the Kruglock Gallery. Anyway, it's probably someone's name and I'm being horrible. Okay. Anyway, another sort of theatrical space and playing around with imagery and projected imagery and video versus shadows. All of these things have, through the years become sort of some of my building blocks. But light and cast shadow, patterns, whatever. Projected images. And action and movement, interactivity. So I still make kinetic sculptures, various things. This was for a show at the Athenaeum in La Jolla, where again they said, you can use the rotunda space, which is this round room with no walls. And I'm still amazed when people actually hang art in this room because there's no walls. But I thought, no walls, I have to use the windows. So and these are cut out imagery, paper cut imagery, which is another thing that comes into my work from time to time. The simple graphics. Yep. Okay. The campfire. So this piece, I had 15 years before this show, I had had a series of very brilliant alien abduction dreams. And I'd never for a moment think I was abducted by aliens, but I had these very vivid dreams in which I was on the alien planet and met the aliens. And one of the things when I met the aliens, here's a little image projected onto this wall of these two aliens. They're maybe 4 feet tall, stand on their hind legs, look like pink weasels, wearing blue utility shorts with utility belts, baggy shorts with utility belts. And I come running in my dream through the forest and I jump into the middle of their campsite. And even though they have high technology, they're still just sort of hanging out around a campfire. But so the campfire comes back into my mind. So this piece is actually, that's a still from a animation, which is also in the show right now. During the wonderful time when the San Diego Museum of Art was doing the Summer Night series or something, I was invited to do something there, and this was my conceptual drawing. As with Cindy, I I draw things out. So I always joke that drawing is the gateway art, but I use it all the time, mostly for planning. But then, so I did a piece called Fourth Dimensional Painting for Jean Miro, because Jean Miro had postulated that in the future there would be four-dimensional paintings. So this is a lighting and shadow piece that is motion activated or activated with motors, and it's being controlled. The lighting is being controlled by a homemade instrument that is a sewing machine powered record player. And then, yeah, there I am in performance performing this thing. I'm saving you from too much video. This one I had to put in there because it's El Greco and me, like in the same image. That was my favorite part. I was supposed to be in the room with the Miros, which would have been pretty great, but I'll take El Greco any day. A couple of years later, I did a piece at the Museum of Contemporary Art called Happy Apple Color Organ. This was... the Happy Apple was a children's toy that's a chime toy. And I had one that belonged to my daughter. And I was listening to it one day, listening to it chiming, going, this really needs to be electric. So I turned the Happy Apple into an electric Happy Apple. And then through a color organ, which was in the 70s, you could go to Radio Shack and buy this thing called a color organ, which was about the size and shape of a stereo speaker with a plastic face and lighting. So you would plug it into your stereo and turn your living room into a disco. So when the music played, the lights flashed. So using that technology, I had people play the Happy Apples, and then this whole phalanx of thrift shopped lamps would go off. Right. This one, I gave myself an assignment. I said, pay no more than $3 for a lamp and go to thrift shops and see what you find. But it was sort of fun then once I started putting these things together to see that there was in San Diego thrift shops anyway, of lamps that are probably 30 years old. There was a heavy sort of Western and Victorian feeling to the whole thing. Anyway. Another collaboration with Brian Dick for an event at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Just because when there's windows, you might as well make imagery in them, cast some shadows. This was a piece that I did, a series of pieces in a group show at Bread and Salt, which is a pretty interesting sort of community gallery space in Barrio Logan. This is a thunder machine. So when you push the timer, it jiggles the metal and makes thunder noise, which then lights up. Whoa, stuck. Lights up. Lighting in these window treatments that I did. So, and the palette fire was part of that suite of work with the thunder machine and those other windows. And then this was a show that I did earlier this spring at Helmuth Projects, which is sort of a light and sound abstract cinematic projection thing, accompanied by myself on the theremin. And that was fun. And then right up to, well, this summer, this is a piece that I did for a gallery up in Escondido called Ship in the Woods. And they had a grand opening in June. And again, I'm back to the feast table. So this time I put a color organ into the top of the table. The table is 25 feet long and has these glass lenses built into the top. So the more activity that's happening around the table, the more the lights flicker. So the table responds to the feasting that's happening. And then I asked people to propose toasts, and mostly we just drank mead. But the mead made people really loud and made the table react. So we're back to the dinner table. I found those glass pieces. They're 18-inch Fresnel lenses. They're irreplaceable, or if you can replace them, they're $500 a piece. And yeah, and I harvested them. I had help from people, students, good ones, really, really good students helped me. Strong students. So I'm at the end of my thing. Yeah, my collaborator one day, so we actually had a leisurely 2 weeks to set up this show. So we built everything on site during those 2 weeks. But everything, around our work schedules, everything had to be built on site in 2 weeks. And at some point in the second week, my collaborator said, what we really need is some flickering, flamey wall sconces. You do it. And I was like, what? It took me 3 days to make those sconces alone, actually. They're made of cardboard. But they have, each one has a little fan and a little flickering thing and a little light bulb. And it's mechanically fiery, flickering thing. So there you go. Fire keeps coming up in my performance or my art as well. I am a little old-fashioned in comparison to some of my professors who were throwing craft out the window. I enjoy making things. I actually enjoy making imagery. I enjoy working with my hands. So if I was entirely conceptual, I'd have no fun. So I actually really like to make the art. I'm also a control freak, so which also makes it harder to collaborate, right? But the craft. So my mother was an artist, and she did a traditional German folk art, which is called Scherenschnitte, which is scissor cutting. And so when my mother was working, when I was a child, I was working next to her, and I've always sort of touched on that without ever fully embracing it as what I do. It's a really simple, graphic, straightforward style. So, and these are things that are cut out on a small scale and then projected onto the wall on a large scale, but then some of the things are cut at a large scale. Yeah, it keeps coming back. Yeah, and, a couple of years ago, I did a public artwork in a small park in City Heights on 43rd Street. So I think in the act of creating the environment, you're imparting a feeling. So, and, my art varies. And sometimes I go for an effect, and sometimes I try to communicate something specifically. So it's whim that, what do I feel like doing today? Like some of them are more are more heavy on content, and some of them are more heavy on effect or environment. And I think that if you think about 1960s conceptual artists in Los Angeles versus New York, I feel like, and maybe it's easier in hindsight, but I feel like there were stylistic differences between what was happening in New York versus happening in LA. And maybe LA is a little more sunshiny, and New York is a little more, warehousey. But even that has broken down, I think, in recent years. So when I go to shows in New York now, and they're contemporary artists of my generation doing stuff, I feel an affinity. I'm not and stylistic differences are so scattered everywhere anyway, so they're less related to where you are, I guess. So I had one of these color organs from the 70s, and I thought, you know, oh, I'd been doing all these performances where I was flicking lights on and off all the time, you know, like just I was flipping switches. And I thought, well, here's a machine that could do it for me. And of course, computers can do it for you now too, right? But this is a very simple electronic circuit that reads sound level and translates that variation of sound level to electrical output. So, but it appealed to me because I've always been sort of intrigued by 19th century pre-film projection devices. You know, in the rush to try to invent moving images, there were hundreds of inventions of spinning gears and lights shining through them and flashing lights, and it turns out that the color organ goes back to that time as well, if not earlier. But so it sort of appealed to my sensibility. I watched it, so the kids get a great kick out of it, and I've never made work for children, but because I like bright colors, I think, and loud noises, I think kids like it. So they actually get this, but I've watched people, there was a dude who walked up and out of confusion started punching it, and I was like, I don't know, out of confusion or what, but I was like, really? That's the way you interact? Okay. Anyway. I think artists should be paid for their work.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, and you know, there's been, you know, the market is certainly very strong right now for young artists, but there is a whole other art to learning how to navigate that. And I do think that being in San Diego has sort of left me with less exercise in how to deal with approaching galleries or talking to gallerists or getting, you know, or selling anything. And I don't know, I think that my do-it-yourself ethos was sparked by a vacuum that I wanted to fill. So, and that was certainly because of where we were. It would be nice to get, it would be nice if San Diego, and we've, you know, there are people I know in this room who've been here for 40 years going, any year, San Diego's going to come into its own and we're going to be a mecca, you know, and it's still going to happen one day. And arguably, we're at a very lively point in San Diego right now. There's a lot going on, actually. Maybe not commercial gallery-wise, but even now I think it's better than it was 30 years ago. If you want people to come to your shows, you go to their shows, and the more you go and get out there, and the more you do, people are going to go, "Oh, you're that dude. I heard about you. Cool. Come and do something here." You know, but I'll be pessimistic about San Diego for a moment. The bottom line is it's a conservative town, military town, and the people with money are not spending it on conceptual contemporary art, you know. I had such a battle with the Museum of Contemporary Art because they were like, we're doing you a favor. And I'm like, no, fuck you, fork it over, man. And I burned that bridge. Like, the person who organized that show won't talk to me in a party now, you know, because I said, couldn't you just flow me $300 to do this thing for you? And they're like, well, we thought you would do it for the exposure. And yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, you know, so, for free. Yeah, and that's true everywhere. Yeah, yeah. And working for art organizations, you're doing it for the love of art, not for the paycheck. So I do sort of think that if you do what you love, the living will follow. I don't know if the riches will follow, but I've made a living, you know, and I'm not going to throw it away, and I'm happy where I am. I'm, you know, I could critique certain decisions of mine throughout my career and think, well, if I had only handled that one a little bit better, you know, it might have led me somewhere. But, you know, what do you do? But do stuff, like keep making stuff. My things have come from making things. Like I keep making work too. LA has that San Diego doesn't have is a range. We have artist-run spaces, and we have the Museum of Contemporary Art, and we have Mark Quint. You know, three, yeah, 3 galleries in between the bottom, and this is thriving, and this is thriving. But what LA has is all the little steps in between, and I think that there are really fun, interesting stuff going on in LA at the
real
down here.
And real wealth and
Right.
real intellectual.
And people who are willing to spend money on it one way or another. Yeah.